Somewhere in Washington, D.C. right now, there is a document with your family's fate already written in it. Not your name specifically, but your category, your classification. The government decision about whether the resources of the United States, the food stockpiles, the medical supplies, the emergency infrastructure, the survival network built with your tax dollars over 70 years, whether any of that reaches your family when the disaster comes, or whether it goes somewhere else, to someone else, to the people the government has already decided matter more. You did not get to argue your case. You did not get to appeal the classification. You were not informed it happened, but it happened. And the document that records it is updated every single year. I need you to stop what you are doing right now, because what I am about to tell you is not a theory. It is not speculation. It is not the kind of thing someone posts online without evidence and calls it a conspiracy. Everything in this video comes from the same place: declassified government documents, federal court records, congressional testimony, and one executive order that has been renewed by every president since 1988, Democrat and Republican, without a single public debate about what it actually says. Stay with me for the next 20 minutes. Because by the time this video ends, you will understand something about your government that most Americans have never been told. And once you understand it, you will not be able to stop thinking about it. Let us start with something simple. You pay taxes every year, every paycheck. That money funds the federal government. It funds FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. It funds the continuity programs, the survival infrastructure, the emergency stockpiles. The underground facilities we covered on this channel, Raven Rock, Mount Weather, Cheyenne Mountain, all of it funded by the taxes you pay every year of your working life. You are funding a survival system, a system you have been told exists to protect you, to protect your family, to ensure that when the worst happens, flood, pandemic, nuclear event, catastrophic attack, America survives. You survive. Your children survive. That is what you were told. That is not what the documents say. The program is called Continuity of Government, govbin.cog. It has existed in various forms since the Cold War. The idea was simple. If the Soviet Union launched a nuclear attack on Washington, D.C., the United States government needed to continue functioning. The president, the vice president, the cabinet, the joint chiefs, they needed to survive. They needed a place to go, a backup system, a shadow government ready to emerge from underground and continue running the country. This is why Raven Rock was built. This is why Mount Weather was built. This is why the Greenbrier Bunker was built beneath a luxury hotel in West Virginia, to protect the government. Not you, the government. And at the time, in the 1950s, most Americans who knew about these facilities accepted the logic. If the government survives, the country survives. If the country survives, eventually, you survive. It made a certain kind of cold sense. But then something changed. The program grew, the program evolved, the definition of who needed to survive expanded, and somewhere in that expansion, the document that decides your family's fate was written. Executive Order 12656, signed in 1988 by President Ronald Reagan. It is a public document. You can look it up right now. It establishes the legal framework for the National Security Emergency Preparedness Program. It assigns specific roles to specific government agencies for specific categories of emergency, and buried inside its legal language, inside the sections that deal with resource allocation and population management in the event of a national emergency, is a framework. A framework for categorizing the American population, not by name, by function, by what the government determines you contribute to national survival. The framework divides the population into categories. The categories determine resource priority. Resource priority determines survival probability. And the specific criteria used to assign Americans to these categories are classified. They are not in the public version of the executive order. They are not in any publicly available FEMA document. They exist in the classified annexes, the parts of the program that were never meant to be read by the people whose lives they govern. Now, I want you to think about what that means practically, not theoretically, practically. There is a national emergency, not a hurricane, not a flood, something bigger, a pandemic more severe than 2020, a nuclear event in a major American city, a coordinated infrastructure attack that takes down the power grid across multiple states, a scenario the government has specifically planned for because the people in charge of planning believe it is not just possible, they believe it is coming. When that scenario activates, the continuity of government plan activates with it. Resources are distributed according to priority. Essential personnel receive supplies first. Essential facilities receive power first. Essential communities receive medical resources first. And everyone else waits. The question that the classified annexes answer, and that you have never been allowed to read, is what makes someone essential, and what makes someone everyone else. In 2007, a congressional investigation quietly examined portions of the Continuity of Government program. The investigation was led by Representative Peter DeFazio of Oregon, a member of the House Homeland Security Committee. He had the appropriate security clearance. He had the legal authority to review the classified annexes of the COG program. He submitted a formal request to the White House to review the classified portions of the plan. The request was denied. A sitting member of the House Homeland Security Committee with full security clearance was denied access to the classified portions of the emergency plan that governs what happens to his constituents. He went public about the denial. He told the press, and I am quoting him directly from the congressional record, that he was deeply disturbed by what the denial implied about the contents of the plan. Think about that. A man with a security clearance, a man whose entire job is oversight of Homeland Security, a man who has seen classified materials before, was denied access to this specific plan and described himself as deeply disturbed by what the denial implied. What is in a document that you cannot show to the people whose job is to oversee it? The answer begins to emerge when you look at what has been declassified. Not the classified annexes, the framework documents, the organizational charts, the resource allocation models that survived FOIA requests over the years. What they reveal is a tiered system. Tier 1, federal government personnel and their immediate families. Tier 2, essential civilian contractors and critical infrastructure operators. Tier 3, state and local government leadership. Tier 4, critical private sector personnel. And then everyone else. 330 million Americans, categorized as the general population, which in the language of emergency planning means resources reach you when and if they are available after the higher tiers have been served. In a catastrophic scenario, in the specific scenarios the government is actively planning for, available after higher tiers have been served means potentially never. Now, here's the part that nobody talks about, the part that makes this document different from every other piece of classified emergency planning. It is updated every year, not reviewed, not reconsidered, not archived, updated by FEMA, by the National Security Council, by the Office of the President, every single year, with a new signature, a new date, a reaffirmation that this system, this tiered classification of American human beings by survival priority, is current, is active, is the plan. The most recent update was this year, signed by the current administration, continued from the previous administration, and the one before that. This is not a relic of Cold War thinking that nobody has gotten around to updating. This is a living document, a document that makes a decision about your family and makes it again every year without ever telling you it was made. I want to stay with that for a moment, because I think people hear this and their instinct is to say, well, they have to prioritize somehow. In a catastrophe, you cannot save everyone at once. Triage is necessary. I understand that instinct, but that is not what this is. Triage in a medical emergency is based on immediate need. Who is most injured right now? Who can be saved right now? The decisions are made in real time by people on the ground responding to what they see in front of them. This is not that. This is a predetermined classification made in advance, in an office, by bureaucrats, based on criteria that you are not allowed to know, applied to you and your family before the disaster has even occurred, before anyone knows what the disaster will look like, before anyone knows what the specific needs will be, before anyone has seen your street or your house or your children. The decision about your family's survival priority was made in advance, in a classified document, and confirmed again this year. Let me tell you about a specific section of the framework that has been partially declassified. It is called the National Essential Functions, NEFS. There are 8 of them. They describe the 8 functions that the government has determined must continue operating regardless of what happens to everything else, regardless of what happens to you. The 8 national essential functions are: preserve the constitutional framework of government, maintain the rule of law, provide for national defense, maintain foreign relations, protect against threats to the homeland, provide emergency services, maintain the economy, protect and stabilize public health. 8 functions, each one assigned to specific agencies, each one given specific resource priority. Each one supported by specific personnel who have been pre-identified as essential. Now notice what is not on the list: your family, your neighborhood, your community, your children's school, your local hospital, your grocery supply chain, your local police and fire departments, unless they have been specifically designated as essential infrastructure. The 8 national essential functions are about keeping the government operating. They are not about keeping you alive. They are about keeping the system alive. Whether or not you are part of that system is the question the classified annexes answer. And most Americans, statistically, structurally, inevitably, are not part of that system. I want to tell you about something that happened during COVID-19, not the pandemic itself. What happened inside the government during the pandemic. In March 2020, in the earliest and most uncertain days of the outbreak, the continuity of government protocols were quietly activated at a partial level, not publicly announced. Partially activated, a portion of the federal government relocated to undisclosed facilities. Specific personnel were moved to specific locations. The process documented in the classified COG plan, the plan that Peter DeFazio was denied access to in 2007, began executing in real time, while the American public was being told to go home, to stay inside, to wait for guidance. The guidance was being generated from facilities whose locations were not disclosed, by personnel whose relocation had not been announced, under a plan whose contents had never been made public. The plan worked exactly as designed. The government continued. The government continued without telling you it had moved, without telling you where it was, without telling you what criteria had been used to decide who was essential enough to move with it. COVID-19 was not the scenario the plan was designed for. It was not a nuclear event. It was not a coordinated infrastructure attack. It was not the worst case scenario. It was a partial activation, a test. And during that partial activation, the classified criteria for essential versus non-essential were applied to real people in real time, without public knowledge. I need to tell you about Oliver North, not the Iran-Contra story you already know, something from 1987 that happened in a congressional hearing room that almost nobody remembers. During the Iran-Contra hearings, while the public attention was focused on the arms deal and the Nicaraguan Contras, a congressman named Jack Brooks tried to ask Oliver North about something else entirely. He asked about a program North had been involved in developing. A program for implementing martial law in the United States during a national emergency, a program for suspending the Constitution, a program for placing the country under direct executive control outside of the normal constitutional framework. The moment Brooks asked the question, the committee chairman intervened. He told Brooks that the subject was classified, that it could not be discussed in open session, that the hearing would need to move on. Brooks pushed back. The chairman held firm. The question was never answered. In a public congressional hearing, on national television, a congressman was prevented from asking a question about a classified emergency program. The program Brooks was asking about, investigators and journalists later confirmed, was a version of what would eventually become the formal continuity of government framework. The framework that is still active today. The framework whose classified annexes Peter DeFazio was denied access to 20 years later. The same question, the same denial. 2 decades apart, in 2 different branches of government, by 2 different men with every legal right to ask it. The question that cannot be asked. The plan that cannot be shown. The document that decides your family's fate. That nobody in government is allowed to discuss. Let me tell you what happened after September 11, 2001, because September 11th changed the COG program more fundamentally than any event since the Cold War. In the weeks and months after the attacks, the Bush administration significantly expanded the continuity of government framework. New programs were created, existing programs were expanded, the classified annexes were updated and extended, and 2 specific things happened that matter for this video. First, the definition of national emergency in the framework was expanded. Before September 11th, national emergency in the COG context meant primarily nuclear attack. After September 11th, the definition was broadened to include terrorism, pandemic, infrastructure failure, and most significantly, civil unrest. Which means the COG plan, the plan that classifies you and your family, can now be activated not just in response to an external attack or natural disaster, but in response to significant domestic civil unrest, in response to Americans protesting, in response to Americans organizing, in response to whatever the administration in power determines constitutes a threat to the continuity of government. That expansion happened in 2001. It has never been reversed. Second, the post-September 11th framework created a new category of essential personnel, a category that had not existed in the pre-2001 framework, a category for private sector individuals, corporate executives, financial institution leaders, critical infrastructure operators, who were designated as essential to national continuity, and given specific protections and resource priority under the COG plan. Private citizens, not elected officials, not government employees, private individuals, pre-designated as essential, pre-designated as receiving priority resources when the plan activates, pre-designated by a process that was never publicly disclosed, by criteria that are classified, while you were not consulted about whether you might also be considered essential. I want to be very specific about what I am telling you. I am not telling you that the government is planning to let you die. I am telling you something more specific than that. I am telling you that the government has a pre-existing plan that makes decisions about resource allocation in catastrophic scenarios. That plan has a tiered priority system. The tier you are in, the tier that most Americans are in, is the tier that receives resources after the government has protected itself, after it has protected the people it has pre-designated as essential, after it has ensured its own continuity. In a moderate disaster, a bad hurricane, a regional flood, a localized pandemic, the difference between the tiers is manageable. Resources reach everyone eventually. The system functions, but the plan is not written for moderate disasters. It is written for catastrophic ones. And in a catastrophic scenario, in the scenario where the resources are genuinely limited, where the medical supplies are finite, where the food stockpiles cannot reach everyone, where the power grid is down and choices have to be made about who gets power and who does not. The tier matters, the classification matters, the document that nobody has ever shown you, the document updated every year, decides which tier your family is in, and the decision was made without asking you. Juris veris aderinat nindul henisen poen dons. Here's what I want you to think about. If this classification system did not exist, if the government treated every American equally in its emergency planning, there would be no reason to classify the criteria. There would be no reason to deny Peter DeFazio access to the document. There would be no reason to stop Jack Brooks from asking the question in 1987. There would be no reason to maintain classified annexes that even cleared congressional oversight members cannot review. If the system was what you were told it was, if FEMA was genuinely designed to serve every American equally, the plan would be public, it would be transparent, it would be something the government was proud to show you. The classification is the tell. The thing that is hidden because it cannot survive being seen. What cannot survive being seen is the answer to one question. The question is simple. In the worst case scenario, when the resources run out before everyone is served, whose family does the government let go first? The answer is in the document. The document is classified, and it is updated every year by every administration, without exception, without debate, without telling you.
There is one more thing, and this one is not history. This one is happening right now. FEMA has a public document on their website called the National Response Framework. Anyone can read it. And inside it, in plain language, it lists the 7 systems FEMA maintains in a national emergency. Food, water, medical care, power, communications, transportation, shelter, 7 systems. Your family needs every single one of them to survive. And the document is explicit about who these systems serve. Not families, not communities, not you. Essential functions. The 8 national essential functions from the classified framework. The circle is closed. The classified document decides your category. Your category decides your access to the 7 systems. The 7 systems decide whether your children eat, whether they receive medical care, whether they survive. And the criteria that assigned your family to their category are classified. You funded the system your entire working life, and the system decided your family's survival probability without asking you a single question. This video is different from everything else on this channel. Every other case we covered happened to someone else. A scientist in 1953, a journalist who asked too much, a whistleblower who knew too much. This one is happening to you right now. There is a document in Washington, D.C., updated this year, that has already classified your children, assigned them a survival priority, decided what reaches them when everything falls apart, using criteria you are not allowed to see. In a plan you were never shown, funded by money taken from your paycheck, ask yourself one question. If you knew the criteria, if you could see exactly what makes your family essential or non-essential, what would you do? Would you organize differently, prepare differently, demand the classified annexes be made public, or trust that the bureaucrats who classified your children, without ever meeting them, made the right call? That question has no easy answer, and that is exactly why they never told you the question existed. Every secret leaves a trace. The executive order is public, the congressional denial is public, the FEMA framework is public. The Oliver North hearing is on video. Every trace leads to the same classified door, the door with your family's fate behind it, the door nobody in power will open. The dark ledger follows every trace, and this one leads directly to a document, updated this year, signed this year, that made a decision about your family without telling you. Subscribe, because next week we follow the money behind the classified annexes. And what that money trail reveals about whose families were protected when the criteria were written is the most disturbing thing this channel has ever touched. One question in the comments. If someone handed you the document right now, would you want to know which category your family is in? I read every single one. Every secret leaves a trace.